Rise up!
This is the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, USA Today's NFL Wire site, covering, of course, Arizona Cardinals. It's episode 741, recording with Seth Cox from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, SB Nation's Arizona Cardinals site. My co-host, as he's been for more than a decade. We've been doing this since 2013. And yeah, we have a short show for the second regular show of the week as we continue to talk about the Cardinals coaching situation, because believe it or not, we have two more coaching candidates, which brings us to a total of a baker's dozen of 13 candidates. And the first domino has fallen with Jim Harbaugh picking a team, landing with the New York Giants. We'll talk about that. And then we'll have a show later in the week as well for our playoff, our divisional round picks, previews, and predictions. But Seth, we've got two more candidates to look at. One which is a sneaky candidate, and another which, kind of adds to the mix, just another guy that could work out. And I know I talked about it on this show, the last episode that we had, or last week, or early in the week, rather, my belief when it comes to head coaches that I think pretty much all NFL coaches are competent, and there are very few difference makers. And it looks like most of what the Cardinals have been looking at have been guys that are mostly probably not difference makers. And it was funny because you sent me a text of you texted me a tweet from somebody who said almost literally the same thing. There's 5 to 8 coaches who elevate their teams, probably 5 to 8 coaches who bring their teams down. Then a bunch of other guys will be successful depending on the roster. And I think the majority of coaches in the NFL, it's a blend of decision-making, staff, rosters, and luck when it comes to health during the season. But what do you think of these new candidates? We start with Houston Texans defensive coordinator Matt Burke and Pittsburgh Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith, who was also former head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. So Matt Burke, for me, is an interesting one because he has an interesting resume in terms of a guy that, by the way, was the Cardinals defensive line coach in 2022. He's got ties with Vance Joseph. He's got ties with Marvin Lewis, with Paul Gunther. He's worked with a ton of great defensive guys, and he's getting to show off his stuff right now with Houston. But of course, it's under the umbrella of DeMeco Ryans, who I think, Seth, you would agree, DeMeco Ryans is probably one of those difference maker head coaches, right?
Yeah, DeMeco's a special kind of coach and leader, and he carried over from his playing days, right? Like, this was a guy that was the emotional and physical leader on the team, and so he's been able to, and he had that cachet. And so it's not to say that a lot of guys don't, but when you see what he's doing and how hard these guys play for him, you see what a guy like that means to players, because he's truly been through it. And that's not to take away from guys like Gannon and things like that, even Cliff, but they're more of the McVays, right? That you look at, and I know McVay was an outstanding high school quarterback, so I don't need to be reminded about that. But you're talking about the highest level, and guys like DeMeco Ryans, really, they're able to get guys to buy in because they believe in what they're selling, because they've lived it, right? And so that's not to say that that can't happen with Matt Burke. I think Matt Burke, the play caller, has been fascinating this year. You look at it, Burke, unless I'm missing it somewhere, he never played in the NFL. Never, I don't think he played in college, or he might have played a little bit in college. But you look at his resume, right? He was in for 6 years in that upper Massachusetts area, the New England area, coaching in Maine, then at Boston College, then at Harvard. And then he got on with the Titans and Jeff Fisher, and you mentioned that. And then he went from Fisher to Detroit with Jim Schwartz.
He's worked with Jim Schwartz multiple times.
And then Cincy with Marvin
Paul
Lewis.
Gunther and Marvin Lewis. He had the connection to Vance in Miami. Jim Schwartz with the Eagles. Robert Saleh, so he's got a Robert Saleh connection as well. Back to Vance Joseph, which in the Robert Saleh connection then connects him to DeMeco Ryans.
Right. And by the way, so the juice with him, with Burke, is interesting because, like, you look at some of these defenses he's coached. The early 2000s Titans were not good. That was kind of the end of that Jeff Fisher era before they blew him out and moved along. And to be fair, that was his first stop, right? Like, he was a defensive quality control coach. That's a very, very different thing. But his last year there, they were second in scoring defense. We know about those Jim Schwartz Lions. They had some decent years, but really the Marvin Lewis Bengals is what I look at, and kind of like where he kind of came into his own. And you look back at that 2015 Bengals team, and they had a bunch of Pro Bowlers, in Carlos Dunlap, Geno Atkins, Reggie Nelson, Adam Jones, all over there. But they had older or limited linebackers, and he was the linebacker coach. And you look at it, he was working with the guy Vincent Ray. He was working with Ray Mayuga, working with Vontaze Burfict when he was on the field, which was very rare for us that remember that, right? Like, he'd work a little bit with a guy, AJ Hawk, at the end of his career. So, like, he had to figure out how to help this defense that had all this talent up front, all this talent in the secondary, and as the linebackers coach, how do I get Burfict on the field, right? Like, how do I keep your best linebacker on the field? And then how do I get these guys in Vincent Ray Maluga to make plays in a defense? And he did a great job with that. They were second in scoring. They were top 10 in yards. And then you talked about it, the Eagles defense in 19 and 20. And then, the last couple of years with the Texans. And so when you look at what he was and what he did, he's done pretty much everything. He's never coached DBs, but he's coached all of the front seven. And now he's calling plays. And he calls plays like a guy, and I get it. They have undoubtedly, the best defense in terms of skill in the NFL. But the way that he calls plays in the game it shows how much he trusts his guys and how much the guys trust him. Now, again, my question is going to be simple. Is that something that's transferable when he's not coaching next to DeMeco Ryans? And I think that's a fair question. But you look at the names that you mentioned, that he's coached with. Obviously, Fisher is out of it. Lewis is out of it. Doug Peterson's kind of out of it. But Jim Schwartz, Robert Saleh, obviously Ryans, Cliff, and Adam Gase are still around in the NFL, and they still have connections. So he's going to be able to pull some guys likely. Here's what I'll say, and I think I've said this about Vance, but maybe I've just said it to you. I don't remember. So when you talk about the Cardinals specifically, and you talk about, maybe they're not going to attract the best guys. Harbaugh, let's be honest, didn't even consider them, right? They got a 8 p.m., 7:30 p.m. Zoom call with Robert Saleh after what was a fantastic performance last weekend, setting himself up for a new coaching position. They're not the most desirable location. We know that. But I do think if a guy like Burke and then obviously Vance Joseph are saying, yeah, I'll go be the head coach there, that does tell you something, because it's not secondhand information, right? It's literally there. They've been in there. They've been in the weight room, the locker room. They've been around Michael Bidwill and what he expects. And so that, I think, says more to me that these guys would give them interviews and be open to coming back and working here than it does a guy like Robert Saleh, who, by the way, would be a fantastic hire. So I'm not like trying to make excuses, but if Saleh's like, no, I'm not even, really giving them the time because of what I've heard, that's a fair assessment. The reputation's not great. But if a guy that's been in the building is like, no, it's fine, I'll go back. That'll be my, my shot, my first head coach. Especially Burke, think about it. His first head coaching job, and it's back with the Cardinals. I know people will say, oh, he's, he just wants the opportunity. You don't think if he goes back to Houston next year and does the same thing that he's not going to be a hot commodity?
Right, exactly.
So it would make sense if he came here, then, it's not as bad as what everybody's saying. That's
right. Well, especially if we think back a couple of years, that Vance Joseph said that when it comes to head coaching interviews, he was going to be picky. He was going to be picky about it because,
he's already done it, and Miami was a cluster for him, right? And so, Denver was a cluster for him. So
he did the interim thing in Miami,
right? And so you just kind of look at it, and you just, if these guys are willing to come back and work in Arizona, knowing the limitations of the organization, especially, I truly do think that says something positive. No, I'm not going to say that means they're going to work out.
Right. Right. Or maybe Vance, his family was like, hey, we liked it in Arizona.
Yeah, go live there for 3 years, get your money, and then we'll figure it out after that, right? But no, I truly do think that if a guy like Burke or a guy like Joseph come back, it does say something. And I know a lot of people are already crapping all over the potential hire of Joseph. Here's the reality.
I mean, far as candidates go, he's qualified.
Well, and he's unquestionably, and I know this is hindsight, but he's unquestionably a better candidate this year than Jonathan Gannon was in 2023. Unquestionably. Because he sure, maybe he doesn't come off a Super Bowl loss, but he's been an NFL head coach. He's coached a top, 3 defense 2 years in a row. You know who never did that? Jonathan Gannon. So that's my whole thing. He's much like much like Burke, they've got options, and the Cardinals, I mean, think about it. Philly's defense in Gannon's 2 years were 10th in yards and 18th in points his first year, 2nd and 8th his second year. And then he was never top 20 in yards, and he got to 15th in 2024 in points. Vance has 2 years in a row of top 3 scoring defenses, and 2 years in a row top 7 defenses in terms of yards. Matt Burke, who's only in year 3 of a being a defensive coordinator, he's got 1 year of 2 years of top 10 in yards, top 6 technically, and 1 year in top 3 because he's second overall in points. Like, these guys have a better resume already than Gannon did. So that should tell you, if these guys are serious candidates, then that should tell you that yes, there are limitations with it. Nobody knows that better than Jess and I. But if these guys are willing to come back and stick it out and try, that should tell us all we need to know about the opportunity.
Brings us to the other candidate, Arthur Smith, who's been a little bit one of those guys you're like, there's nothing exciting about this guy at all. However, Scott, he was with Tennessee for a long time. One of those coaches who seems to stick around, like Jeff Rodgers, for example, who's managed to stay on 18 different Cardinals coaching staffs. Arthur Smith managed to survive 4 coaching staffs in Tennessee, working with. So he worked with Mike Munchak, Ken Wisenhunt, Mike Mularkey, and Mike Vrabel before he became the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. He did great work with Ryan Tannehill. He worked with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers did not have a bad season, by the way.
Here's my take on Arthur Smith. Definition of slightly below average, right? As a head coach, 21-30. I know people would be like, well, that's 9 games under 500.
7-10, 3 straight years, man.
Yeah.
Consistent.
But his first 2 years in Tennessee, or his only 2 years in Tennessee, as the OC, he went top 12 in yards and top 10 in points, top 2 in yards, top 4 in points. Okay, and then he gets to Atlanta, and Atlanta is similar to where Arizona is right now. I think that's a fair assessment. Dan Quinn went 0-5. Raheem Morris went 4-7. They were 4-12. They were 16th in points per game. They were 19th in defensive points per game. Matt Ryan threw the ball more than anybody in the NFL. Does that sound familiar? That year for the Falcons. They have Matt Ryan still, and they go 7-10. And I know people will be like, well, that's not very good. Well, listen to these names that ran the ball that year. Cordarrelle Patterson.
Mike turned that was the year he turned into a decent running back. He was a receiver, mind you, returner, and kind of had a rebirth kind of as a running back.
Yep. Mike Davis, who was a journeyman, runner at that point. I think he was on his, and I'm not joking when I say this, his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
He was a long-time backup. Seattle, Carolina.
Yeah, he was on his 6th team. Okay. Somebody, and I'm not trying to be rude, named Quadri Ollison, Wayne Gallman. Those were the running backs. The receivers. A rookie, Kyle Pitts, went for over 1,000 yards. Russell Gage, we talked about Cordarrelle Patterson. Olamide Zacchaeus, who's still in the league, I think, making decent plays every once in a while, but like that was his second most yards in a season. Calvin Ridley after the suspension, like those were the wide receivers he was throwing to. And by the way, Matt Ryan was 36 and basically washed at that point. They were terrible, 26 in points, just not good. 29th in yards. Then they do the really, really, really dumb thing that Jess and I are just very hopeful that doesn't happen with the Arizona Cardinals, but it is the Arizona Cardinals, so who knows? They go and they go get a veteran journeyman guy in Marcus Mariota, and then they draft a day 2 Desmond Ridder, and Arthur Smith still somehow gets to 7-10. They're 15th in points, 24th in yards. Their offense is, mostly ugly. You look at that year, Tyler Algier, a rookie running back out of BYU, has over 1,000 yards. Cordarrelle Patterson backs up his second year, and he has over almost 700 yards. They rushed for 2,700 yards.
I remember that year. Their run game was so good, and their defense, they were so close so many times. They were a great team because they covered the spread all the time, but would fall just short. It seemed half of their games.
And you look at it, they were third in the NFL in rushing that season. Fourth in yards. I mean, they almost averaged 5 yards per carry. What's crazy about that season, Jess, they were first in attempts, but fourth in yards per attempt. Do you know how rare that is to be that good at running the football? And then his final year, the death knell year, they were third in attempts, 9th in yards, dropped down to 17th in yards per attempt. And I know a lot of people had issues with how he used his rookie running back, Bijan Robinson. Why weren't you just running him into the ground? That's a fair question. I mean, to be fair, we know that Arthur Smith is not afraid to run somebody into the ground, right? I mean, we all remember 2020 Derrick Henry, right? Like, Derrick Henry only ran for 2,000 yards that season. He only had 3. I mean, this is what's crazy, Jess. That 2020 year, no other running back on the roster had 50 carries for the Titans.
I mean, why would you when you've got that beast? Well, we have to point out as well, Monty Ossenfort was the director of player personnel for Tennessee in Arthur Smith's final season as OC with Tennessee. So there is a connection there as well.
And so, am I a huge Arthur Smith guy? Probably not. If he was the guy, would I be livid like I've seen fans in the hypothetical? Absolutely not. Like, a lot, I get it. It was very, very average, incredibly average, and nobody wants to deal with that. And I understand that. But he got average out of dog water. And then you look at the last two years in Pittsburgh, again, average 16th in points, 23rd in yards, right? That was with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. His top receiver was George Pickens, who, they couldn't keep on the field, and Pat Freiermuth. I get it. Like, it's not a sexy hire. But
it's a stable one. Like, you know that there's a high floor and there's always the potential of a year going well. But yeah, from my perspective, I'm looking at this list of candidates. There's not a single one of them I'm going, ew. They're like Arthur Smith, underwhelming. Vance Joseph, a little bit underwhelming. But everyone else, I would say Matt Nagy, underwhelming. But at the same time, like, he took the Bears to the freaking playoffs too. So I don't think there's a bad candidate. There's just far less. And I think Arthur Smith equals the least exciting candidate of this list. But he has competence in what he's done. He has a connection to general manager Monty Austin Fort. He might be, based on like personnel wise, what they've got right now, the guy that can get the most out of this group. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. The biggest issue right now is you do still have questions outside of just the quarterback position. The running back position's a real question mark, especially with James Conner, the injury he sustained and his age. And then let's just be honest, and we can debate this later on, but you need at least one running back, like high-end running back, and potentially two, because I don't think you can go in trusting Trey Benson either, right?
Correct.
Like,
it's very much like the BJ Ojulari situation entering this year. Like, he went into year 2, like they're going to count on him. He gets hurt, and now you're like, if we get anything out of him, fantastic, right? You can't count on him. Like, if he turns out, that's great, but we're not going to lean on him for a second straight year.
And so, those things all matter. But yeah, I mean, and it's, and that's just part of it, man. Like, I genuinely don't know who gets them to playoff contention the fastest. But I also don't know.
Because it feels higher. Their rosters, we've been saying this Cardinal situation here, and whoever's the coach, this is not an easy, like they're saying quick turnaround. We're like, good luck with that. Yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Next on the Rise of Sierra podcast, best of Cardinals Talk on the Web. Quick final segment talking about Jim Harbaugh and a little rumor, like coaches who they might keep around. That's coming next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best of Cardinals Talk on the Web. We're back talking about the coaching situation, and there's one thing that we know: Jim Harbaugh now crossed off the list for the Cardinals. We don't know if they even took the call, hung up, or just said no thanks. He has accepted the job for the New York Giants. Going to coach, Jackson Dart, Cam Scadaboo, Tyron Tracy, Malik Neighbors, and the young pass rushers that they've got there. How does that impact the coaching situation here? I think for me, I don't think it impacts the Cardinals much, other than now other dominoes can start to fall, because Jim Harbaugh was candidate number 1 for probably everyone, and now that he's gone, everyone can start going with their plan B and C.
Well, that's just it. And you and I, we kind of giggled over the John Harbaugh stuff in Arizona. We knew there was just 0% chance. It just was never going to happen. Now, do I think it's going to work in New York? I don't know. I saw a great meme today of somebody said the foundation for New York, and it was a picture of Harbaugh, Jackson Dart, Cam Scadaboo, and Malik Neighbors, and somebody responded with, Harbaugh would finish second in a race today. So, like, you've got a lot of questions in New York. You and I both love Cam Scadaboo. It's not, I'm not banking on him being
especially after the injury that he had too.
Right. Well, and just the way he plays, like the chances of him being injured again, right, are very, very high. Malik Neighbors isn't even walking yet, or like walking without crutches, right? Like we just saw that report the other day. So yeah, I mean, it's
Granted, NFC East, the way things look right now, the Eagles, it's a situation where you go from worst to first because the Eagles look shaky. Washington's a mess. Dallas is Dallas.
I mean, hey, if Dallas hires Jonathan Gannon as their defensive coordinator, who knows what happens there? So, yeah. So I mean, exactly. It's an interesting division. I think he looked at it from a couple of things. One, obviously, it's New York. Two, obviously, it's absurd money. Allegedly, a 5-year, $100 million contract. I'm a big John Harbaugh guy. Absolutely not. Like, when was the last time a contract like that for a coach worked? Not like an extension, but like, oh, we're hiring this guy, right? Like, I genuinely can't even remember. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But yeah, it allows everything else to start to take place. It seems like, based on the rumors, the murmurs out there, that a guy that you and I both really, really like, Clint Kubiak, is going to be with the Falcons, which, kind of makes sense. He was on that staff before. He's a Shanahan disciple. Ooh. He knows Matt Ryan, all that stuff.
Yes, and then we were talking before the show. Get Kyler to Atlanta, man. That'll be fun.
And you just look at it, right? It would be fun to get something done quickly, but the reality is, I mean, who are you? Like you said, we're up to 13 now, right? Candidates.
Kind of crazy, right?
Well, I guess it's technically 12 since Harbaugh's gone.
Oh, no. There's 13 excluding Harbaugh.
Okay, there's 13 excluding.
Because it was 11 when we last came, and we added Matt Burke and Arthur Smith.
And so you look at it from that perspective, right? So you've got, I'm pulling it up right now. Hold on. So you've got Vance, obviously, that we talked about. He can't sign anywhere. You got Robert Saleh. He can't sign anywhere. You've got Thomas Brown. He can't sign anywhere. You've got Chris Shula. He can't sign anywhere. You've got Matt Burke. He can't sign anywhere. You have Mike LaFleur. He can't sign anywhere. You got Clint Kubiak. He can't sign anywhere. So that means, and I get it. Cardinals fans are like, what's taking so? Okay. So that means the options right now are Anthony Weaver, the former defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, who sounds like he's going to join Harbaugh in New York if he doesn't get a head coaching job. Raheem Morris, Matt Nagy, Jeff Hafley, who I have no desire to see here, Jesse Minter, and Arthur Smith. Those are the guys you can hire now. So which one of those guys are you like, hey, let's
hire those guys?
Yeah. Go hire that guy, right? Like, which one of those guys is that guy? And like, could you imagine if the Cardinals were like, oh yeah, we're going with Arthur Smith right now? Again, you and I just kind of went back and forth on the good, the bad, and the indifferent on him. You and I would be like, yeah, we understand it, right? Like, it's a similar situation to what Atlanta had. And he proved that he can do enough offensively. It wouldn't be our first choice, but it's not like it's going to be dire straits. The rest of the fan base would mutiny. They'd be like, oh my God, what are they trying to fail? Or are they trying to tank? It's like, well, who else are they going to hire that's available? I get it. Go hire Matt Burke. You and I are fine with that. That would be a fun hire. It'd be fun to see him work. But he's not eligible to be hired yet. Robert Saleh, who everybody's like, you gotta interview Saleh. He's not eligible to be hired. Like this whole don't let him leave the building. He's got to go prep for a playoff game. So it's not just that. There's a lot that comes with it, and that's again, that's my thing. They're not hiring somebody tomorrow, and if they are, nobody's going to be happy about it, because I guess if Mike McDaniel was on there would be a contingent of the fan base that would be happy, right? But outside of that, who else?
That's it's just not much. But yeah, the one other thing that we want to bring up, and it impacts things, is that we heard perhaps that there are guys on staff that they want to keep around. If a new head coach was brought, when a new head coach is brought in, is there anyone from this current staff that you would like to see the Cardinals keep around? And maybe it's just depending on the staff. I think Jeff Rodgers has done enough that it would be fine, because their special teams is fine. And he's worked with a lot of head coaches. It'd be interesting to see what kind of the thing would be there. But do you think there's anyone on staff that would be worth keeping around? Because it seems like every time the Cardinals make a head coaching change, there's 1 to 2 to 3 guys that tend to get held over.
I would be interested to see some of the offensive staff. I thought the passing game coordinator is an interesting cat. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Drew Terrell, their receivers coach.
Yeah, Drew Terrell. Thank you. Depending on who they hire, if he's an offensive or defensive guy, I thought at the end of the year, Justin Fry had a bunch of nobodies playing decently, right? And it seemed to be that they were starting to get some cohesion. Wouldn't kill. I'm more indifferent on the him as being back as the O-line coach. I'm really interested, honestly, man, in like the defensive guys, because I just wonder how much of it was the scheme from Jonathan Gannon.
Like the philosophy, and it's really interesting because and I know the fronts or whatever they are. Gannon was a Mike Zimmer 4-3 kind of guy. Now he did use some, 5-man fronts in Philly, but Nick Rawlis comes in and he keeps it as a 3-4. It's a real traditional 3-4 and philosophically, because basically they have, especially the first 2 years, they'd have a big 2-down nose tackle that take off the field. They did some interesting with big nickel. I wonder, and I don't know where I heard this. And because it didn't make sense, because I don't remember any connections they had, that Rawlis was kind of a Vic Fangio guy, and the two barely crossed paths. And it was basically at the end when Fangio was a consultant, right?
Yeah.
For the Eagles, but it feels like they barely crossed paths. But there's people love Nick Rawlis. Like, people look at Nick Rawlis and say he's young, and if we look at it, we're like, there's no reason why people should believe that much in Nick Rawlis based on the way the defense performed for 3 years, especially this year. When, like we've talked about it on this show, like people are talking, Drew Petzing has lots of pressure on him, but like, did he really? He'd had a top, like with Kyler playing, they were basically a top 10 unit. They had a great run game. Now this year was a disaster. No one was talking about Nick Rawlis with the pressure, and he had bad statistical units the last 2 seasons, and entering this year, they threw all their money on the defense, and then they were terrible again. But people around the league, the analysts, they all speak so highly of Nick Rawlis. Be interesting if he was just married by obligation to Gannon's philosophy when it came to coverages and schemes in the back end, especially.
Yeah, and there is something too that I don't know if we've talked about on this show before, but there is a belief among many people that there is a higher up within the organization that really loves to run the 3-4 defense. He may or may not own the team, so he has kind of the say.
Well, really, that is really interesting because go back to Steve Wilkes when he said there are going to be multiple, and Bidwell was really believed that they should have been a 3-4 defense, and guess what they've been ever since. And when Gannon was hired, we were convinced that they're going back, and then there was still a 3-4 defense. And if you look at the guys, look at the defensive guys that they are talking to. I mean, they're almost all odd fronts.
Yeah. And so when you look at it from that perspective, you do wonder like how much is on Rawlis and even Gannon to an extent on stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one to see, because I don't, you and I were talking about it kind of off the air. Like, what if, can we divorce Rawlis from Gannon's scheme and see what he does? Or is that just like an absolute non-starter for fans?
It'd be interesting pairing Vance Joseph with Nick Rawlis. Now, Vance Joseph probably is going to bring in a Wade Phillips guy, because Vance Joseph is, when he describes his defense, it is a Wade Phillips 3-4 scheme. He believes in that scheme. That's what he's run his entire career. But it would be interesting to pair him with someone like Rawlis and how that would look. Or if even Vance Joseph would call, like, is he going to be head coach and defensive play caller? That's another thing to consider as well. Will he do that? Or would Rawlis do that, or anyone like that? And it'd be interesting to see how that will go, or even the defensive guys that bring in Anthony Weaver or Raheem Morris, Robert Saleh, or guys like that. Like, how many of these guys would be head coach and play caller, or would they be a Gannon type guy?
Yeah, exactly. I'm interested to see how that all works out.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and wrap up this edition of the Rise of Sierra podcast, Best Our Cardinals Talk on the Web. We have one more show. We're going to talk our NFL picks and previews for the divisional round. But until then, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.